You're listening to Innovators by bcjobs.ca, Western Canada's largest job board. This podcast is about innovative companies with a focus on people. What sets them apart in terms of their leaders, company culture, and future outlook? As a business leader, what can you do to encourage innovation? As a recruiter, what can you do to adopt an innovative corporate culture? And as a job candidate, what can you do to stand out?
Welcome back to the podcast. My name is Simon, and I'll be your host for today's episode with Andrew from Clio. Clio is a cloud-based legal software based in Vancouver with offices across Canada and even overseas. Prior to Clio, Andrew actually worked with several different organizations, all as a recruiter, most notably Uber during the time when Uber first entered Canada. So we'll talk a little bit about that and also all the experiences he had prior. Andrew, I'm going to shut up. I'm going to let you introduce yourself, let the people know who you are, what you've done in the past, and kind of how you got started with Clio.
Thanks, Simon, and thanks a lot for having me on here. So I'm never good at being concise about speaking about my background, but I'll try to keep it short because I'm sure your listeners don't really care that much. But I came out of school around the recession in kind of the 2009, 2010 era. So came out of school, did not have any idea what I was going to do. Jobs are pretty limited. Kind of fell backwards into recruitment, found an internship, unpaid, so probably illegal, but it got me my start. So that's good. And really just started out there in a boutique recruiting agency, mostly recruiting for technical roles. It was a great experience. I worked there for 3 years. You know, I tell people I'd never go back to that job and I would never trade that experience because it taught me a lot and taught me how to handle, pressure, how to really, frankly, just recruit, how to be nimble. So it was a really great experience. But I got to a point where I would say, dissatisfied with the singular focus of a recruiting agency, which can often just be about revenue and bringing money in. And while that's important, I think, making the move in-house was really, I wanted to be ingrained on a team where I could work with building out a team longer term. And I found the role at Uber. I was hired there as a lead recruiter to really drive all recruitment across Canada when we were essentially entering these markets from kind of square one. We had already established a bit of a presence in the US, but Canada, we were pretty much just trying to stay there and stay legal and work through all that. So it was a really interesting time to be there. I joined around, I think I was employee 1,800 and something. Within 3 months, I was more tenure than half the company. So we basically doubled in a few months. And by the end of my time there, about 2.5 years later, we were at over 20,000. So I really saw scale and fast forward there. I really saw, all the problems that come with scaling too fast and learned a lot about how to see around the corner a bit, about things that'll break as you grow. So that was really cool. After that experience, I moved on to Clio. I had an opportunity to really, join a smaller company, Canadian-based company. It was really appealing to me. They had a really good trajectory in a fairly unsaturated market, being legal tech. And I was tapped there to come in and help lead recruitment at Clio. And that's where I'm at now.
Cool. Yeah, I wanted to dive a little bit deeper, coming from the agency side, like you mentioned, to, at the time, Uber, a very large company. How was the shift? You mentioned there were some differences. What was the biggest thing that shocked you, if anything? And what were some of the biggest takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. I think, some of the things changing from agency to in-house is like how much goes on behind the scenes. Like in an agency role, you're a third party. You basically get what a client tells you, or, you're kind of on the periphery, right? As you go in-house, you like, I learned so much about how much thinking goes into building the right team, the right skill sets, the right culture, and all the implications behind that. So it's a bit of like a light bulb moment in the sense that when you're at an agency, you're trying to fill roles. And I'm speaking obviously from my experience. That's how I kind of read it. And when you're in-house, you're trying to build a team and you're trying to build a culture and you're trying to build a team that's going to drive the company forward. So it was a big shift for me and a bit of like an aha moment for me there.
So not so much that it was anything difficult per se, but it was just a very different experience.
It was really interesting to see behind the scenes. It was certainly had its challenges. Like I had to figure out how to, go from more transactional recruiter, like go find candidates and get them into the process with my clients, to like thinking a little more deeply about, who I'm approaching, who I'm moving through, who I'm trying to get, and like really understanding all those needs of the team. So it was definitely like a challenging shift for me to really expand, what kind of question I'm asking, what kind of, how I support these managers properly as like my first in-house kind of foray.
And then from there, after close to 2 years, right, at Uber, you transitioned over to Clio. So tell us a little bit about how you got started there.
Yeah, when I came to Clio, it was tough to leave Uber. I really loved that, my time there, but it was kind of time. Like we had really built up the Canadian teams. My role was changing. They were starting to centralize more things in the US, and I said I want to be closer to the strategy and be closer to really driving a big impact. And so I was really excited, when I joined Clio. I mean, I'll be honest, when they reached out to me and someone said, legal tech, I'm like, that my first reaction was that sounds really boring. But as I like dove into it, as I learned about more about it, I realized like this is a massive industry that's fairly underserved from a technological point of view. And it's a really impactful industry, right? Like a lot of people like access to justice, inequities that exist, like all that exists, and like the legal industry is a part of that. So Clio's mission really, after learning more about it, getting over like the initial reaction, I really realized like how impactful the role could be. So just, that was some of my decision making as to why I joined. I think that joining there, I'm trying to think back, like we were around 200 people, kind of first few months, call it there. We're really like understanding what we have in place on the recruitment side and on the kind of people side, and figuring out like what is going to break when we're twice as many employees and what's not scalable here. And there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of really great stuff, and there's a lot of stuff that we really needed to clean up. So it was really cool kind of being a part of that change, being kind of part of that drive towards building things for a company that's going to grow to 500 as we are today, and to 6, 7, 800, 900 over the next few years. So that was a really cool experience, just being a part of that, and continues to be. We're still kind of constantly iterating on what we have in place.
Yeah, that's really cool. So for those in the audience that don't know Clio, can you maybe give us a short little background and maybe how Clio started and what it actually does, the technology?
Yeah, absolutely. So it started, we were humble beginnings, started about 10 or 11 years ago now. Two co-founders, Jack and Ryan. Jack's still here as our CEO. And, essentially from there, it was slow growth, obviously figuring out like they knew there was an issue in the legal industry of not really being forward thinking in terms of a shift to more software based, cloud based tools. Like you saw these other industries, like the medical industry saw like a big disruption in the early 2000s of like getting more on par with like where we're at technologically and how that can solve a lot of problems, create a lot of efficiencies, stuff like that. So the legal world hadn't seen that shift. There's, and I'm speaking from where I'm staying, but like there's resistance to that. There's, it's tough to, it's, change management at the end of the day. There's like security issues, like mistrust of the cloud, stuff like that. So it was tough to kind of, start to pick up momentum, but momentum slowly built for them. And they really like grew the company steadily over that kind of incubation period. And, around, I'd say 2014, 2015, that's when like the scale from a like revenue and employee base really started to happen and really started to take off more. And essentially, like to answer your question, we are basically a leader in cloud-based legal technology. So when you think of a legal practice, like everything from like administrative tasks, billing solutions, payments, how do you properly keep in touch and drive business development, all these things that were very, for other industries, kind of like table stakes, like didn't exist in the legal world. So really creating like a all-in-one platform solution that's going to allow legal firms to really operate better, leaner, cheaper, because that's going to free up their time to do more, right? So I think, that's kind of my spiel on it, but yeah.
So your clients are the law firms, right?
We started as a solution for basically small solo practices and really like small firms. Over time, we've built our product up to a point where our sweet spot is kind of, anywhere from 1 to 50 plus 50 users and now beyond that as well. So trying to develop a solution that's really caters to different size firms. That's also, customizable and different options for them. And, the legal industry is interesting because it's really fragmented. There's not like a few like massive enterprise players. There's like some big ones, of course, but like it's made up of a lot of smaller firms. So it's not like we're not chasing massive enterprise deals. We're chasing a lot of small deals, but it's also very like underserved and not a ton of solutions. So we've been able to really distance ourselves as a leader here.
And you mentioned earlier in the podcast that you do have some offices overseas. I guess there are aspirations to grow beyond Canada.
Yeah. We have an office in Dublin that's grown. I think we were around 8 or 9 people when it started. We're around 20, 21 at the last time I counted. We built out an engineering team there who are really, internationalizing the product more and built up our sales team more there. So we're starting to sell into countries within EMEA and elsewhere. So they're kind of, they're a hub for future growth elsewhere across the world. And who knows where we're going to go. Like our focus has been North America, but that's the arm that's really starting to figure out, how can we drive this in other countries? And they're doing a pretty awesome job, really. It has like a much more startup feel in the sense that how legal systems work in Canada are very different, in other countries, right? So it's not like one size fits all. So they've got a big challenge there, but it's been going really well. And I think, we're poised to keep growing out there, which is exciting.
Well, I want to shift gears a little bit here. I think that one thing that everyone is kind of following is this whole COVID pandemic and how it's been affecting a lot of different industries. We're not too familiar with the legal industry, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about how the industry has been doing over the last 3 to 4 months and how has Clio been able to weather the storm, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think like many industries, legal industries certainly been hit and been like most, it's been a challenge, right? And we definitely saw like in March, April, concern around we're a subscription based model. So you see like certain law firms are reducing the size of their team, right? Due to, their own business declines and whatnot. So I think, we saw, we were kind of in the world of really not knowing, what's going to happen, really like where we can kind of predict certain growth and expansion and stuff like that before. Now, like a lot of those are out the window at that point. Right. So, we really saw, some uncertainty in the industry. We saw, some challenges in the industry but at the same time, we saw, a shift of some people, of some firms, for example, that might have resisted technology now are embracing it more because they're in some ways forced to go remote and have a distributed team. Our solution really can help with that. So I think that I'm not trying to find like a silver lining in a pandemic because I don't think there really is any, but like essentially it put Clio on people's radar that it might not have been on before, right? So I think we've done a really good job in terms of like driving more sales. Our churn has stabilized a little bit as kind of the world stabilizes a little more, but we're still living in that world of a bit of uncertainty, talks of second waves and this and that, obviously. But, we've been keeping our head above water. We tightened the purse strings a bit around hiring and other kind of expenses for a little while, but we're kind of getting out of it fairly in a good spot. So we're happy with where we're at.
Well, talking about hiring, you mentioned there were a lot of people on the team, close to 500, right, before COVID. So there were a lot of people on Clio's team. Can you talk a little bit about how you approach or how the leaders within Clio approach managing people? More importantly, as a very innovative platform that you guys are building out, there's a lot of innovation within the team, maybe on the back end that people don't see. Like, how do the leaders approach managing people?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll probably speak more from my own perspective, and I'll try to make some generalizations over the whole company. But no, it's been certainly really cool to be at Clio and like for myself developing as a leader over time. Learning from some really really sharp people. One thing that my boss, she's currently on mat leave, Lindsay Hannigan, kind of instilled in our team early on was something that she titled human and high performing. And, essentially, and like, I'm going to get this wrong. I'm assuming Lindsay's not listening, so she'll probably have a better definition. But like, we don't trade off high performance to ensure the environment's cozy and lax, but we also don't trade off elements that make us human, caring about professional development, learning and development, health and wellness, creating, safe spaces, trust. We don't trade these off just for the bottom line either. We want to make a company that does both, that drives for high performance, but also recognizes we're all human and we're all kind of, figuring out our own battles together. Right. So I think that's something that resonated with me, and that's something I learned a lot from her, is how do I balance that with my team and make sure that I drive high performance, and but at the same time create like trust, create safe space for them, understand, challenges outside of work that could be happening as much as they want to share, understand that we're humans first at the end of the day, and trying to balance those two things. So I think that's something a lot of leaders at Clio embrace as well. I think like another big part of our culture, especially from a management point of view, is we call it live a learning mindset, and really just making sure that we're pushing to develop, whether you're an IC or senior leader, like what's the next stage in your development? Where do you want to get to? How are we going to get you there? And whether that's at Clio and that there's space for that, or we're just equipping you with the tools for your next job, like that's an important part of leadership at Clio too. It's making sure that no one feels stagnant and embracing that part of our culture too. So there's a ton more too. Like I could rant on forever about this stuff, but those are two things that really resonate with me. And two things I've latched onto a lot when I'm, figuring out exactly what my leadership style looks like over time.
You mentioned balance, learning mindset, and also like personal growth. What does that look like? Are there personal seminars that happen within Clio? Are there a certain like you get like certain time off to kind of relax? Well, how does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one thing that really we've done well is, we really started thinking about the people side early, like well before my time even. We invested in our people function early, like and people, kind of interchangeable with HR, just so I'm not confusing anyone. But, essentially we really invest in that team earlier than some companies might have, some companies never do, right? Like for example, we brought in like an in-house performance coach really early on when we were under 200 employees to work with our leaders, to work with people at the company to, really make sure that they're supported in that sense. So she's awesome. We regularly do trainings on different topics. So we call them manager learns. This is not a part of my function. This is Allison McGarrickle and Chris Ye, but essentially really like when you think about it, we've grown a lot. So we've promoted a lot of people from like IC manager roles, right? So like a high performing IC doesn't always translate to a good manager. So we want to make sure we have like programs in place to make sure they feel supported. They have people to go to. They have certain more regimented trainings in place, that kind of stuff, which I think is a really cool thing, because that, other companies, sometimes you're just thrown in the deep end there, right? And have to figure it out. So I think that's a big one. So just the investment I've seen in like learning and development, the investment I've seen in building out a strong people team early on, those kind of things really differentiate ourselves from certain company, which is pretty cool.
Well, yeah, talking about people, people and culture are sometimes said to be the most important thing in the company, more important than the technology or even the industry itself, right? A lot of people say if you just put the right team together, anything really is possible. As a recruiter, and you've been a recruiter for many years now, how do you hire? How do you hire and choose the right people that continue to steer the ship towards the direction that the company and the leaders want?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And I think, it's I couldn't agree more in the sense that like, and obviously I'm biased as a recruiter, but essentially I think it's just I've seen mishires before. I've seen bad hiring decisions. I've seen the impact those can make, right? Especially like as when you bring on whether it's a new leader or really strategic type of role, like it's really important to get it right. And I don't think there's many recruiters out there who can honestly say they always get it perfectly right, right? Or a hiring manager that's only hired, the perfect fit. And I think some things I look for when we're at a company like Clio or frankly at Uber or previous ones I've supported, it's you're obviously looking at background, what they've accomplished, but really like what I think is really fundamental is looking for people who have gone into a role and by the time they left, like moved the needle significantly and really drove, whether it's innovation, whether it's drove towards a certain goal, didn't stay stagnant and really push it forward. I think like at a company at Clio or Uber where I've been, I mean, it's a lot of the stuff you take on is like blue ocean projects that don't have a clear playbook, right? So find people that can thrive in that kind of ambiguity, find people that aren't afraid of that. And it's not for everyone. And I'm not saying like, some people prefer to join a place where they're, bigger team and more of like an established playbook, so to speak, to follow. Where here, we really need to uncover the people that are going to be driven to, help write that playbook. And that comes with like evaluating people that have, in some ways done that in the past, evaluate people who have pushed for innovative ideas, who have pushed for things to improve, really like push to unlock like whether it's the potential of a team, potential of a product, whatever it may be. So I think trying to measure out with people as to that I'm interviewing that, drive to improve on things, that drive to improve on themselves, like that often to me will translate to, a strong hire for us.
I absolutely agree with you. I mean, you've worked for two very fast growing companies, right? Uber and then now Clio. And you mentioned, yeah, the people that will make these kind of startups or new initiatives grow are the people that can push a needle, people that are driven and will work above and beyond whatever is written on the role itself. I want to dive a little bit deeper. Like, are there certain questions that you're asking? Just the general feel of the person? Are there certain, maybe one or two key things that you look for to find these people that are very driven?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that kind of varies role to role, of course, but I think like what I'll say is my, kind of general style in uncovering that would be going really deep on probing questions. Like I think like some recruiters will like, it'll be like question, answer, next question, answer, next question, answer, right? Like, Simon, like tell me about a project that you're most proud of in your last role. You'll give me like, something you've done, right? And they'll say, okay, like who else supported this project? And you're figuring out like what exactly were your contributions on it? How did this idea come to form? Like really just like taking what people give me and being able to like go like 4 layers deeper, right? I think anyone who's interviewed is trying to sell themselves, right? And sometimes like my job is really to uncover the truths. And I'm not saying people are lying, but they might gloss over something. They might keep it at the 1,000-foot level. I want to get in the weeds with them and really understand like what drove them, what they did, who was a part of it, how the roadblocks that got in their way, really going deep on certain things, right? So I think that's like, I don't have a perfect, here's my 2 questions I asked to uncover it. I think it's more taking it many layers deeper than the high level questions that you sometimes get in interviews and really uncovering like what they accomplished, what they did, and what their contributions on it were and how they handled the roadblocks that inevitably got in their way, right? Because there's always going to be roadblocks when you're working at a startup or like a growth stage company. So yeah.
It sounds like before an interview, you don't really have a list of 10 or 12 questions that you might ask someone, like most recruiters, right? You actually go in with a certain mindset. Like you're going to go in and you're going to dive so deep into their past experiences that you can almost tell if they're a driven person or not.
Yeah, I think so. I think anytime I get a new role, I'm looking at it and I'm saying like, as like the first gate in the process. And obviously there's going to be more interviews and like people are going to go deeper. And, if I'm hiring, director of engineering, like I'm not qualified to like judge their programming skills and stuff like that. Right. So it's like, what is my role in this? Like, what am I supposed to uncover here? And that comes down to like starting with like working closely with, the hiring manager or like the exec I'm working with to understand exactly the gaps in their team, what they need in this person, really understand that first and foremost so that I can then tailor my conversation to that. So do I have a list of, 10, 12 questions to ask? Yes and no. Like I think I have more buckets that I say I need to figure this out. And that's going to come through like in my mind, that more kind of probing, going really deep on certain topics, not just getting like the question and answer, kind of go back and forth in my notes. Here's my 10 questions I asked and their answers. It's more like here's the like picture I can paint of this person as accurate as I can possibly by the conversation I had, right? So yeah, it's a bit of, it's a bit of art, it's a bit of science. You have like certain guiding kind of things you want to extract from the conversation. But I think like just over time with experience, I learned how to make that more conversational, more kind of in depth in a way that allows me to really like tell the right story in my mind. So yeah, I think like that's kind of how I approach it, and it's worked for me so far. But I'm not sure. I certainly understand there's different styles, different recruiters out there. There's certain roles that are very transactional nature, and like the question answer is more important. Where like, if I'm working, for example, on like a VP of Corp Dev role right now, like that's more like I need to really understand like how they're working through deals, how they think about M&A, like that kind of stuff, which is a lot more complex than like if I'm hiring, for example, like an entry level sales role, right?
So for more entry level positions, maybe a little bit more transactional, typical 10 or 12 questions. But for the higher senior, more more senior, maybe 5 to 6 years experience, then you want to dive deep.
Yeah, and I think there are different kind of bars for what you're looking for, right? Like I think like when I talk about trying to find people that have moved the needle somewhere or really like push for innovation or whatever it may be, like that certainly applies to certain roles. Am I going to ask that to someone who just graduated out of school I'm interviewing? No, because they haven't had like a chance to do that, right? So I think there's still overlap on the two. Like there's other ways to think about that. There's whether it's academic success, volunteer work, whether it's, what motivates them, what gets them out of bed. Like there's still ways to uncover stuff there, but it certainly has to take a different format depending on the type of role you're working on for sure.
I wanted to ask you, BC Jobs, we have a lot of candidates that go through our website. Some of them might be interested in working at Clio. When you look around the company, is there a certain type of candidate that usually makes it through? Like, for example, we recently interviewed Tentree, an apparel, environmentally friendly and conscious brand, and they like to hire people that care about the environment. And then we have PayPal, digital online transactions platform. They like to hire people that are interested in passionate about fintech. Is there a certain type of person that maybe like they're passionate about legal software? Is there a certain type of person that tends to make it through the tough interview process at Clio?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think if we only hired people that were like readily interested in legal tech, we probably wouldn't hire many people. So it's that's part of us telling the right story, same way I got sold on it once upon a time, right? So I think like I don't think that like industry specific knowledge is certainly not important to us. I think what is important to us is first and foremost being able to latch onto the mission of what we're doing, and that's really trying to disrupt and change the practice of law. And I think it doesn't mean you necessarily like to a T have to be passionate about that, but you have to be passionate about like a mission driven and value driven kind of organization. I think that's part of it. I think the other one, I'm trying to make kind of trends across people we hire and that type of person. I think like, again, it always varies role to role. There's different levels of this, but I think what is another important factor would be that, someone who I already kind of mentioned, but like someone who can work through a role, like especially a strategic position that doesn't have the playbook. I think that's important. Like someone who's like a self-starter, someone who's always looking to improve on things, that kind of thing's important. And I think the last one I'd say, and this applies a lot to like engineering or other kind of technical roles, it's like, we're trying to build the best product possible for our customers, right? And at the end of the day, like we're only going to get as far as the service we provide for our customers. So I think like we want people that understand what they're building, not just like, okay, I'm going to go and work on this, whatever it is, or jump into the code on this. It's more like, why am I doing this? Like, what value is this going to drive for customers? So I think like that customer obsession piece needs to be there for a lot of roles, to always be like thinking about what I'm doing in my job, how is that driving value for the customers? So I think like that kind of mindset helps a lot. And it's something that we try our best to measure out in the interview process as well.
Well, I'd like to open the floor for you now to say anything you want. It could be a cool campaign or initiative that Clio has in the works, or it could be something that you're doing personally or in collaboration with another organization.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one thing, I'll mention, and I'll say it, I'll kind of preface it with saying that this is, earlier stages in development is, but like with COVID, previously to COVID, we were all typically working from offices across Canada, across either Toronto, Calgary, and in Vancouver. As we shifted to more, remote work, we realized like we can still really succeed in working more distributed. So we're not going to be shifting to a totally remote first workforce, but we're going to basically be giving people we're going to give people more options. We're going to give people, you can work in one of our hub offices when the world goes back to normal. That is, you can work partly remote, partly in an office, or you can work fully remotely. And there'll be like, there'll be nuance to that. There'll be certain roles that might require more in office time and stuff like that. But we're going to be moving to a workforce that's more distributed and really like works really strongly it doesn't have to be under the same roof, basically. So we're still fleshing that out a lot, but it's going to really open up a lot of new candidate pools for us. We're going to be able to hire different places we haven't hired before. We're going to hire, certain teams. We mostly hired sales and marketing in Toronto. Now we're going to be able to hire more engineers, design out there, product, whatever it may be. So I'm really excited about the future. I'm excited and scared about it in a lot of ways, because like sometimes like it's change management, and sometimes like people resist change. I resist change. I like being in an office, but I think it's a really cool challenge to tackle, in the sense that, we're kind of changing how we work, and we need to kind of figure out on the people side, as well as other teams, how we kind of keep our foot on the gas and keep the horsepower we have, while still shifting to this more kind of like distributed remote world. So it's going to be exciting.
So being more open to hiring, kind of closing the boundaries a little bit, and being able to look outside of the area that you're currently hiring in.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's first and foremost from a recruiting mind, like my own, I'm like, great, there's more candidates we can go after. That's going to allow us to like continue to push on the best people we can and find the best people we can find. And then, there's obviously all sorts of pluses for people. Some people have different things going on in their life, and being at home more helps, because they have, whether it's families, kids, like things like that, whatever they need to do. Or, some people prefer to be more in the office. So it's really going to provide optionality to people at Clio, which is really exciting. But at the same time, like that's a huge lift for the people team, right? And how do we things like even like really simple things like, meeting cadence, Zoom fatigue is real. Like, being on video all day is tough for some people. So it's like, how do we work better asynchronously on certain things, trying to shake the meeting culture that can exist at companies that grows, how someone that we hire fully remotely for the same team has the same onboarding experience for someone we hire in a hub office. Like all these things, there's so many things under the microscope that we have to figure out, but it goes back to what I said and what I love about being here. It's helping write that playbook for some innovative and new things we're doing. So I'm excited about it.
I will leave that there for now. For everyone that's tuned in, thank you so much for listening. And until next time, take care, be safe, and consider checking out Clio.com to learn more about their legal software and remote career opportunities. Thank you so much for joining us today, Andrew.
Thanks a lot, Simon. Have a good one.
Hello, everyone. This is Simon, Vice President of bcjobs.ca. BC Jobs is used by hundreds of recruiters and over 200,000 candidates per month. We also run career fairs to help support the jobs market. We regularly run career fairs both in person and virtually, with up to 400 candidates per career fair. Visit bcjobs.ca to discover jobs locally and remote.